The scream that tore through the night air made even the coyotes fall silent. But nobody in the grand house above heard it, because Lydia Turner had learned long ago that screaming only made things worse. She pressed her dirt-smudged hands against the cold stone wall of the cellar, her legs trembling from exhaustion after standing for what felt like hours. Mrs. Adelaide Whitmore had locked her down here 3 days ago for the supposed crime of looking at the master's son too long during dinner service, and the narrow shaft of light that filtered through the gap beneath the door had become Lydia's only connection to the world above. It was late summer in 1878, and the New Mexico heat made the cellar feel like an oven during the day, though at night the temperature dropped so severely that she shivered in her thin cotton dress. The Whitmore estate sat just outside Chisholm Ranch, New Mexico, a sprawling property that had grown wealthy from cattle and the misfortune of others. Lydia had been brought here 2 years ago at 16, sold into servitude by an uncle who needed drinking money more than he needed a niece. The arrangement was supposed to last 5 years, after which she would receive a small sum and her freedom. She had marked off each day in her mind, counting down to her 18th birthday just 3 months ago, thinking that somehow being of age would change her circumstances. It had not. Her stomach cramped with hunger. They had given her nothing but a cup of water and some hardtack yesterday, delivered by the cook who looked away with shame but did nothing to help. Lydia understood. Everyone who worked for the Whitmores understood. You kept your head down, did your work, and hoped you would not be noticed. Being noticed meant punishment, and punishment in this house came in many forms. She heard footsteps above, the heavy tread of Mr. Whitmore making his way to his study. Then lighter steps that belonged to Adelaide, whose cruelty masked itself in silk dresses and pearl necklaces. The woman had taken an instant dislike to Lydia from the first day, perhaps because Mr. Whitmore's eyes had lingered a moment too long on the new servant girl, or perhaps because cruelty was simply Adelaide's nature. Lydia sank down onto the earthen floor, her legs finally giving out. She could feel the dirt caking under her fingernails, smell the musty dampness that permeated everything in this underground prison. There were rats down here. She had heard them scuttling in the darkness, though they seemed to leave her alone as long as she remained still. A small mercy in a place devoid of mercy. She must have dozed off because she woke to the sound of something different. Not footsteps from above, but something else. A creaking. Then a splintering crack that made her eyes fly open in the darkness. The door at the top of the stairs shuddered once, twice, and then exploded inward with a shower of wood splinters. Lydia scrambled backward, her heart hammering as a figure descended the stairs. The moonlight streaming through the now open doorway silhouetted a man so large he had to duck his head to fit through the frame. Broad shoulders nearly brushed both sides of the stairwell, and as he came closer, she could make out more details. Long dark hair tied back with a leather cord, a thick beard, and arms that looked like they could snap a tree trunk in half. He wore buckskin clothing and carried the smell of pine and fresh air. "Are you the girl they keep down here?" His voice was rough like gravel, but not unkind. Lydia could not find her voice. She nodded, pressing herself against the far wall. He moved closer, and she could see his eyes now. Dark, almost black in the dim light, but there was something in them that made her think of storm clouds right before the rain breaks. Not threatening, but powerful. Unstoppable. "Name's Tobias Edwards," he said, crouching down so he was not looming over her quite so much. Even crouched, he was enormous. "I trade furs and game with the cook here. She told me about you, said they have been keeping you down here for days with barely any food or water." "You should not have come," Lydia whispered, finding her voice at last. "They will have you arrested, or worse." Tobias made a sound that might have been a laugh. They can try. I have been in these mountains since I was 15 years old, and no lawman has caught me yet when I do not want to be caught. Besides, I have not done anything wrong. I am just helping a girl who fell down into a cellar. Terrible accident, that door breaking. Despite everything, despite the fear and hunger and exhaustion, Lydia felt the corner of her mouth twitch. That door looked pretty solid before you broke it. Did it? I do not remember. Memory is a funny thing. He held out a hand that was easily twice the size of hers. Can you stand? She took his hand, feeling the calluses and strength in his grip as he pulled her to her feet with seemingly no effort at all. Her legs wobbled, and before she could fall, his other arm came around her waist, steadying her. How long since you ate a real meal? 4 days. Maybe 5. I lost count. She felt more than heard the growl that came from his chest. These people. I knew the Whitmores were cruel, but this. He shook his head. Come on, we are leaving. I cannot just leave. My contract, your contract, does not include being starved in a cellar. That is unlawful imprisonment, no matter what papers you signed. He guided her toward the stairs, keeping his arm around her waist because her legs were still unsteady. We can argue about it later when you have some food in your belly and some clean air in your lungs. As they emerged from the cellar into the kitchen, Lydia blinked against the lamplight. The cook, Martha, stood near the stove with her hands clasped together, looking worried but determined. I put some supplies in a sack, Martha said quietly. Food, water, some extra clothes I pulled from the laundry. They belong to that awful woman, but I figure she owes the girl more than a few dresses. You are a good woman, Martha, Tobias said, picking up the sack. And you never saw us. Never saw who? Martha said, turning back to her bread dough. They moved through the kitchen and out the back door, Lydia marveling at how quietly such a large man could move. The night air hit her face like a blessing, cool and clean after the stale mustiness of the cellar. She breathed deeply, feeling almost dizzy from it. A horse waited in the shadows, a massive chestnut gelding that matched its owner in size and power. Tobias lifted Lydia onto the saddle with the same ease he might lift a child, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to grasp the reins, and she realized she felt safer in that moment than she had in 2 years. They rode away from the Whitmore estate at a steady pace, not fast enough to attract attention but not slow either. Lydia looked back once at the house that had been her prison, watching it disappear into the darkness. She should have felt fear about what came next, about the uncertainty of her future. Instead, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. They rode for what must have been 2 hours, leaving the developed areas behind and heading into the mountains. The landscape changed from cultivated fields to scrubland to pine forest, the elevation rising steadily. Tobias seemed to know every turn, every path, navigating by moonlight and instinct. Finally, they reached a clearing where a cabin stood against the mountainside. It was solidly built, larger than Lydia had expected, with a covered porch and a stone chimney. Smoke drifted from that chimney, and she wondered if someone else lived here. I keep the fire banked when I am away, Tobias explained, apparently reading her thoughts. Easier to get it going again when I return, and it keeps the cabin from getting too cold at night. He dismounted and helped her down, though this time she managed to stand on her own, her legs finding their strength again. Her head spun slightly from hunger and exhaustion, but she was determined not to collapse. Tobias noticed anyway. He always seemed to notice. Inside. Sit. I will get the fire built up and make you something to eat. The interior of the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. A large bed occupied one corner, covered with furs and woven blankets. A table and chairs sat near the hearth, both handcrafted from solid wood. Shelves lined the walls, holding supplies, books, and various tools. It was the home of a man who lived alone but lived well. Lydia sank into one of the chairs, watching as Tobias moved around the cabin with practiced efficiency. He built up the fire, hung a pot over it, and began adding ingredients. The smell of cooking meat and vegetables made her stomach clench with anticipation. "This will take a bit to cook proper," he said, "but you should start with this." He handed her a piece of bread and some dried meat. "Not too fast, or you will make yourself sick. Small bites." She wanted to devour it all at once, but she followed his instructions, taking small bites and chewing thoroughly. Even this simple food tasted better than anything she remembered from the Whitmore house. Tobias settled into the other chair, watching her with those dark eyes. "Tell me how you ended up in that place." So she told him. About her parents dying when she was young, about living with her uncle who saw her as a burden, about the contract that had seemed like a better option than starving on the streets. She told him about the Whitmores, about Adelaide's cruelty and her husband's indifference, about the endless work and the casual violence that had become her daily existence. "I kept thinking I just had to make it 3 more years, she said quietly. 3 more years and I would be free. I could go anywhere, do anything. But lately I started thinking I might not survive 3 more years, that cellar," she shuddered. "That was not the first time, just the longest." Tobias's jaw clenched, the muscles working beneath his beard. "You are 18 now." "Yes, since May." "Then you are of age to make your own choices. That contract was signed when you were 16, signed by a guardian who sold you like property. I do not think any judge would uphold it, especially not with what they have done to you. You know a lot about the law for a mountain man." "I read. And I had some schooling before I came up here. My father was a lawyer back in Missouri before he drank himself to death. I learned a few things from him before the end." He stood and checked the pot, stirring the contents. "This is ready. Eat slow." The stew was thick with meat and vegetables, seasoned with herbs that made it rich and satisfying. Lydia ate slowly as instructed, savoring each bite. She could feel strength returning to her body with each swallow, the gnawing emptiness in her stomach finally beginning to ease. When she finished, Tobias took the bowl and refilled it halfway. "A bit more, but not too much. You can eat again in a few hours if you are still hungry." "Thank you," she said, and the words felt inadequate for what he had done. "I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You do not owe me anything." He sat back down, his large frame making the chair look small. "Martha told me what was happening and I could not leave you there. It is as simple as that. Why? You do not know me." He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. 5 years ago, when I first came up into these mountains, I was running from some trouble in town. Nothing serious, just a fight that got out of hand. But I was angry and hurt, and I figured I would live up here alone, away from people and their problems. Then one winter, I found a family stranded in the snow. Father, mother, 2 little girls. Their wagon had broken down and they would have frozen to death if I had not brought them back here, sheltered them, and helped them fix their wagon come spring. He turned to look at her. "That family taught me something. Being strong, being capable of surviving alone, that is one thing. But using that strength to help others, that is what makes you human." I have been trading with the folks around Chisholm Ranch for years now, providing meat and furs, and I have heard stories about the Whitmores. When Martha told me about you, told me what they were doing, I knew I had to act. Lydia felt tears prickling at her eyes. I had started to think nobody cared, that I was just something to be used until I broke. You are not broken. Bruised maybe, tired certainly, but not broken. He leaned forward, his expression intense. You are stronger than you know, Lydia Turner. You survived 2 years in that place. You kept yourself together when many would have fallen apart. That takes a kind of strength that has nothing to do with muscles." She wiped at her eyes, embarrassed by the tears but unable to stop them. Tobias stood and moved to a shelf, pulling down a clean cloth and handing it to her. He did not say anything about her crying, just gave her the space to let it out. When she finally composed herself, she asked, "What happens now?" "They will look for me. Adelaide will not let this go. Let them look. These mountains are my territory, and I know every canyon, every pass, every hiding spot. Besides, in a few days, I am taking you to Santa Fe. I have a friend there, a lawyer who owes me a favor. He can help you break that contract legally, make sure the Whitmores cannot touch you." Santa Fe. That must be 50 miles from here. Closer to 60, but it is worth the journey. You need legal protection, not just physical protection. Though, he added with what might have been a slight smile beneath that beard, you have both now. The exhaustion was catching up with her, making her eyelids heavy despite the fear and uncertainty still churning in her mind. Tobias noticed, as he seemed to notice everything. You need rest. Real rest, not whatever you managed in that cellar. He moved to the bed and pulled off several of the furs and blankets, carrying them to the other side of the cabin. "You take the bed. I will make a pallet here by the fire. I cannot take your bed. This is your home, and you are my guest. Besides, I have slept on worse than a pile of furs on a wood floor. You need the bed more than I do." She wanted to argue more, but her body was making its own decision. She stood, swaying slightly, and made her way to the bed. It was the most comfortable thing she had felt in years, the furs soft and warm, smelling of pine and leather and the outdoors. "Tobias," she said as he settled onto his makeshift pallet. "Yes. Why do they call you a mountain man?" "You seem more civilized than most of the so-called gentlemen I have met." She could hear the smile in his voice when he answered. "Because I live in the mountains and I am a man. Folks are not very creative with their naming. Sleep now. You are safe here." And surprisingly, she believed him. Lydia woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, she felt disoriented, unable to place where she was. Then memory flooded back. The cellar, Tobias breaking down the door, the ride through the mountains. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. "Easy," Tobias said from the table. "You are safe. It is morning and I have made breakfast." She pushed the furs aside and stood, noticing that someone had placed the sack of supplies Martha had given them near the bed. "How long did I sleep?" "About 10 hours. It is nearly noon." "Noon. I never sleep that late." "Your body needed it. Come eat, then you can clean up if you want. There is a stream about 50 yards from the cabin, cold but clean. I set up a privacy screen there years ago for washing." Breakfast was simple but filling. Eggs from chickens she could hear clucking outside, more bread, and the coffee that smelled like heaven. As she ate, Lydia looked around the cabin more carefully in the daylight. Everything was well made and well maintained. Books lined one shelf, their spines showing titles like The Last of the Mohicans and Walden. A rifle hung over the door and various tools and traps occupied another wall. "You built all this yourself?" she asked. "Most of it. The cabin was here when I arrived, but it was falling apart. I rebuilt it piece by piece, made it sturdy enough to withstand the winters up here." He poured himself more coffee. "I like working with my hands, always have. What made you come up here, besides the trouble you mentioned?" He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I did not fit in down there. Too big, too rough, too quick to anger when I saw injustice. My father drank himself to death, and my mother had died years before. I had a younger sister, but she married a good man and moved east. There was nothing keeping me in town and everything pushing me away. Up here I found peace, purpose. I hunt, I trap, I trade with the settlements, and I do not have to pretend to be something I am not. And what are you? He met her eyes. A man who believes in doing what is right, even when it is hard. A man who would rather live alone than compromise his principles. A man who... He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. A man who is glad he broke down that cellar door. Heat rose in Lydia's cheeks, and she looked down at her plate. In the daylight, she could see Tobias more clearly. He was probably around 23 or 24, with strong features and those intense dark eyes. His hair, tied back with a leather cord, fell past his shoulders. His arms, bare in his sleeveless buckskin vest, were corded with muscle built from years of hard work. He was, she realized with a start, the most handsome man she had ever seen, in a raw, untamed way that had nothing to do with the polished gentleman who visited the Whitmore house. After breakfast, Tobias showed her to the stream. True to his word, there was a canvas screen set up among the trees, and the water was cold but wonderfully clear. Martha had packed soap and clean clothes, and Lydia spent nearly an hour washing away the grime and fear of the past days. The dress Martha had taken was indeed one of Adelaide's, a simple blue cotton work dress that the woman probably wore when inspecting her gardens. It fit reasonably well, though Lydia was thinner than Adelaide from years of inadequate meals. Still, it felt like luxury after her stained and torn servant's clothing. When she returned to the cabin, Tobias was working on something at the table. As she got closer, she saw it was a leather belt, expertly tooled with a geometric pattern. "That is beautiful," she said. "It is for you. You will need a proper belt for traveling, and this dress does not have one." He held it up, measuring it with his eyes. "Try it on." She wrapped it around her waist, and he adjusted it, his large hands surprisingly gentle as they worked the leather. He was close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his body, smell the scent of pine and leather that seemed to cling to him. Her breath caught, and she stepped back quickly when he finished. "Perfect fit," he said, apparently not noticing her reaction. Or perhaps noticing and politely ignoring it. "We will leave for Santa Fe tomorrow morning. That gives you another day to rest and regain your strength. The journey will take about 4 days on horseback." 4 days, but you said it was 60 miles. "The direct route is 60 miles, but we are not taking the direct route. I want to avoid the main roads where the Whitmores might have people looking for you. We will go through the mountains, taking paths that most folks do not know about. It is longer but safer." 4 days alone with you in the wilderness," she said, then immediately regretted how that sounded, but Tobias just nodded seriously. "I know it is not proper, but we do not have much choice. I give you my word that I will be a gentleman. Your safety and reputation are important to me." "My reputation was ruined the moment I became an indentured servant," Lydia said bitterly. "Respectable people do not see servants as having reputations worth protecting. Then respectable people are fools." He set his tools aside. "You are worth protecting, Lydia. Your reputation, your dignity, your future, all of it." She felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. "I am not used to people saying things like that to me. Then the people in your life have been saying the wrong things." He stood and moved to the shelves. "Come on. If we have a day before we leave, I should teach you some things about traveling in the wilderness. You need to know how to spot good water, how to tell which plants are safe to eat, and how to start a fire." They spent the afternoon with Tobias teaching and Lydia learning. He was a patient teacher, showing her how to identify edible plants, how to read the signs that indicated water nearby, and how to build a fire using flint and steel. His hands would cover hers, guiding her movements, and each time Lydia felt that same flutter in her chest, that awareness of him that went beyond gratitude. As the sun began to set, they prepared dinner together. Tobias had her help him cook, teaching her how to season game meat and which herbs grew near the cabin were best for cooking. It felt domestic and comfortable, nothing like the tension-filled kitchen at the Whitmore estate where every movement was watched and judged. "You are good at this," he said as she diced vegetables with surprising skill. "I worked in the kitchen often. It was better than working directly under Adelaide's supervision." "Tell me something," Tobias said, turning meat in the pan. "What did you want to be? Before all this happened, before you ended up in that house? What were your dreams?" No one had asked her that in so long that Lydia had to think about it. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said finally. "My mother taught me to read and write before she died, and I loved it. Loved the way words could transport you somewhere else, make you feel things, teach you things. I thought maybe I could teach other children that feeling. You could still do that. I have no education beyond what my mother taught me, no credentials, no money to pay for school. Santa Fe has schools. Some of them are always looking for assistants, people who can help with younger children while learning to be proper teachers themselves. My friend, the lawyer, he knows people. He might be able to help." Hope flickered in Lydia's chest, fragile as a candle flame. "You really think so? I do not say things I do not mean." He plated the food and carried it to the table. "You are smart, Lydia. I can see it in the way you talk, the way you think. You deserve a chance to use that mind for something more than surviving cruelty." They ate dinner as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink visible through the cabin windows. Lydia found herself watching Tobias more than the sunset, studying the strong lines of his face, the way his hands moved with such confidence and grace despite their size. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, catching her staring. "Just that I cannot believe this is real. Yesterday I was locked in a cellar and now I am here, eating a good meal, talking about teaching. It feels like a dream. It is real." He reached across the table and took her hand, his palm warm and rough against her skin. "You are free, Lydia. Maybe not legally yet, but in every way that matters. You are free." The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading through her body. She looked down at their joined hands, his so large and dark from the sun, hers small and pale. "I do not know how to be free," she whispered. "I have been told what to do, where to go, how to act for so long. I do not remember how to make my own choices. Then we will figure it out together." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "Starting with Santa Fe. Starting with breaking that contract and making sure you never have to go back to that place." That night, lying in Tobias's bed while he took the floor again despite her protests, Lydia stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what she was feeling. Gratitude, certainly. Relief. Safety. But there was something else. Something that made her heart race when Tobias looked at her. Something that made her want to be near him even though they had only known each other for 2 days. She told herself it was just because he had saved her, because he was kind when she had known so little kindness. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. There was something about Tobias Edwards, something in his quiet strength and gentle respect that called to her in a way she had never experienced before. "Lydia," his voice came from the darkness near the fire. "Yes, are you afraid? Of the journey tomorrow, I mean." She considered the question honestly. "No, I am not afraid, not with you." There was a long pause. "Good, that is good. Sleep now, we have a long road ahead." But Lydia lay awake for a while longer, thinking about roads and journeys and the mountain man who had broken down a door to bring her into the sunlight. They left at dawn, the morning air crisp and cool as Tobias helped Lydia onto his horse. He had packed supplies carefully, showing her where everything was stored and explaining what each item was for. His rifle was secured to the saddle, and a large knife hung at his belt, but he had assured her these were just precautions. "We are unlikely to meet trouble," he said as they started up a narrow mountain trail, "but I believe in being prepared." The landscape was breathtaking. Lydia had never been far from Chisholm Ranch in her 2 years there, and she had certainly never been up into the mountains properly. Pine forests gave way to rocky outcrops, which gave way to valleys filled with wildflowers. Eagles soared overhead, and once they spotted a small herd of deer watching them from a distance. Tobias pointed out various landmarks as they rode, teaching her how to navigate by the position of the sun and the shape of the mountains. He told her stories about the land, about the different animals and plants, about the seasons and how they changed the wilderness. "You love it up here," Lydia observed as they stopped beside a stream to water the horse. "I do. It is honest. The mountains do not lie or cheat or pretend to be something they are not. They are beautiful and dangerous in equal measure, and they make no apologies for either." He helped her down from the horse, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "The mountains teach you truth." They ate lunch sitting on a flat rock overlooking a valley. Tobias had packed dried meat, bread, and some early apples. The food was simple, but Lydia thought it tasted better than any fancy meal at the Whitmore house. "Can I ask you something?" she said, watching him sharpen his knife on a whetstone. "Anything. Do you ever get lonely up here, living by yourself, I mean?" He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer with the same careful thought he gave to everything. "Sometimes. Winters can be hard when the snow is deep and I might not see another person for weeks. But then I remember what it was like living among people who were never truly there, who wore masks and played games. I will take honest solitude over false companionship any day. And you have never wanted a family, a wife, children." His hand stilled on the knife. "I have wanted those things. I just never found someone who could love this life, who could love me as I am rather than trying to change me into something more civilized." He looked at her then, his dark eyes intense. "What about you? Did you ever think about marriage, family?" "Not really. Those things seemed like luxuries for other people. I was just trying to survive." She picked at the bread in her hands. "But lately, these past 2 days, I have started thinking maybe I could have more. Maybe survival is not enough." "It is not enough," Tobias said firmly. "You deserve to live, Lydia, really live, not just survive." They rode on through the afternoon, climbing higher into the mountains. The air grew thinner, and Lydia found herself breathing harder. Tobias noticed, as always, and slowed their pace. "We are pretty high up now. The air is different here. You will get used to it, but it takes time." As the sun began to set, they reached a sheltered spot among some large rocks that formed a natural windbreak. Tobias dismounted and helped Lydia down, then began setting up camp with efficient movements born of long practice. "We will camp here tonight," he said. "There is a small spring just over that rise, good water. We can have a fire without it being visible from below." Lydia helped as much as she could, following his instructions to gather kindling and arrange the bedrolls. Tobias had brought 2 this time, she noticed, and he set them up on opposite sides of the fire. Maintaining propriety even in the wilderness. As night fell and the fire crackled between them, Tobias cooked dinner while Lydia watched the stars appear overhead. There were so many more stars visible up here, away from the lights of civilization. They sprawled across the sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It is. I never get tired of looking at them." He handed her a plate of food. "My mother used to say that stars were souls of good people watching over us. I do not know if I believe that, but I like the idea." "Your mother sounds like she was a good woman." "She was. She deserved better than what life gave her, better than my father, certainly." He stared into the fire. She used to tell me that real strength was not about how much you could lift or how hard you could hit. It was about how you treated people who could not defend themselves. She would be proud of you, Lydia said softly, of the man you have become. Tobias looked at her across the fire, and something passed between them, something that made the night air feel warmer despite the mountain chill. I hope so. I try to live in a way that would honor her memory. They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future. Lydia found herself opening up in ways she never had before, telling Tobias about her childhood, about her parents, about the dreams she had put away when reality became about survival. Those dreams do not have to stay put away, Tobias said. You can take them back out, make them real. With what? I have nothing. No money, no skills that anyone values. You have intelligence and determination. You have strength that comes from surviving things that would have broken other people. That is worth more than money, Lydia. Trust me. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with them, and they settled into their respective bedrolls. But Lydia found herself staring across the fire at Tobias's silhouette, wondering what it would be like to be held in those strong arms, to be loved by a man like him. The thought shocked her. She barely knew him. She should not be having such thoughts. But her heart did not seem to care about propriety or proper timelines. Her heart only knew that for the first time in years, she felt truly seen, truly valued. "Tobias," she whispered, not sure if he was still awake. "Yes." His voice came back immediately. "Thank you for everything. For saving me, for believing in me, for treating me like I matter." There was a pause, then she heard him shift in his bedroll. "You do matter, Lydia, more than you know." She wanted to say more, wanted to tell him about the feelings growing in her chest like wildflowers after rain. But fear held her tongue. Fear that she was misreading his kindness, that her gratitude was confusing itself with something deeper. But as she finally drifted off to sleep under the star-filled sky, she dreamed of strong arms and dark eyes, of a life lived in truth among the mountains, of love that was as honest and enduring as the ancient peaks surrounding them. The second day of their journey took them through a narrow pass between two towering rock faces. Tobias rode carefully, explaining that this route was rarely used and therefore safer from any pursuit. The walls of stone rose up on either side, creating a cool shadow even in the midday heat. "How did you find all these hidden trails?" Lydia asked, her arms around his waist as they navigated the rocky path. "Years of exploration. When I first came up here, I spent months just wandering, learning the land. I needed to know every path, every stream, every cave." It was partly about survival and partly about finding peace. "Walking these mountains, being alone with my thoughts, it helped me work through a lot of anger and pain." "You still carry that anger?" She felt his body shift as he considered the question. "Not like I used to." The mountains have a way of putting things in perspective. Human problems seem smaller when you are standing on a peak looking out over hundreds of miles of wilderness. But some things still make me angry. Injustice, cruelty, people who abuse their power over others. Like the Whitmores. "Like the Whitmores," he agreed, his voice hardening slightly. "People like that make me remember why I left civilization in the first place." They emerged from the pass into a beautiful meadow filled with purple and yellow wildflowers. A stream meandered through the center, and the sound of water over rocks was peaceful and calming. Tobias guided the horse to the stream's edge and helped Lydia down. "We will stop here for lunch and to rest the horse," he said. "This is one of my favorite spots in all the mountains." Lydia could see why. The meadow was like a secret garden, hidden away from the world, perfect and unspoiled. She walked among the flowers, feeling the sun on her face, breathing in the sweet scent of wildflowers and clean air. I feel like I could stay here forever, she said. Tobias was unpacking their lunch, but he looked up at her words. Could you? Really? Stay away from civilization, from people and towns and all the comforts that come with them? She turned to face him, considering the question seriously. I do not know. A week ago, I would have said no without thinking. But now. She gestured around at the meadow, at the mountains beyond. Now I think maybe civilization is not as important as I thought, not if it includes people like the Whitmores, not if it means giving up this feeling of freedom. He watched her with an expression she could not quite read. That feeling of freedom, Lydia, it does not come from the mountains. It comes from inside you. You can take it with you wherever you go. But some places make it harder to hold onto than others. True enough. He laid out their lunch on a cloth. Come eat, we still have a good distance to cover this afternoon. As they ate, a thought occurred to Lydia. What will you do after Santa Fe, after we meet with your lawyer friend? I had not thought much beyond getting you there safely. I suppose I will return to my cabin, continue trading, continue living as I always have. Alone. Alone, he confirmed, but something in his voice suggested the idea did not appeal to him as much as it once had. Lydia wanted to ask more, wanted to suggest something she had no right to suggest. Instead, she changed the subject. Tell me about your friend in Santa Fe, the lawyer. His name is James Morrison. We grew up together in Missouri before my family moved west. He stayed back there, went to law school, but eventually came out to New Mexico about 3 years ago. He is a good man, honest, and he does not back down from powerful people. If anyone can help break your contract, it is him. And he owes you a favor. Tobias smiled slightly. I kept him from freezing to death when he first arrived in New Mexico. He thought he could handle a mountain winter with city supplies and city knowledge. He thought wrong. I found him halfway up a mountain, nearly dead from exposure, and got him down to safety. He tells everyone I saved his life, though I think he is being dramatic. That sounds exactly like saving someone's life. Maybe. Either way, he has been trying to repay me ever since. This will give him that chance. They rode on through the afternoon, and Lydia found herself increasingly aware of Tobias's body pressed against her back, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. Every time the horse moved over rough ground, she was jostled against him, feeling the solid muscle and strength of him. She tried to tell herself it was just natural attraction, just the response of a young woman who had been starved of kindness and affection. But it felt like more than that. It felt like recognition, like her soul knew his somehow. That evening, they made camp beside a small lake that reflected the mountains and sunset sky like a mirror. Tobias caught fish for their dinner, teaching Lydia how to properly clean and cook them over the fire. His hands covered hers as he showed her how to hold the knife, how to scale the fish with quick, efficient movements. You are a good teacher, she said, acutely aware of his closeness. You are a good student, quick to learn, not afraid of hard work. His breath was warm against her ear. Most people from the settlements would turn their nose up at work like this. I have been doing hard work for years. This is just different hard work. He moved back, giving her space, and she felt the loss of his presence like a physical thing. They cooked the fish in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes when two people are at ease with each other. As they ate, Tobias said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Yes." "That son of Mr. Whitmore, the one you supposedly looked at too long, did he ever?" He paused, seeming to struggle with how to phrase the question. "Did anyone in that house ever hurt you in ways beyond the physical?" Lydia understood what he was asking. "No. Adelaide watched me like a hawk specifically to prevent that, I think. Not out of kindness to me, but because she did not want competition. The son, Richard, he was interested, but he was also afraid of his mother. He never touched me beyond brushing against me occasionally in narrow hallways. Accidents, perhaps, or perhaps not. The relief on Tobias's face was evident. Good, that is good, because if they had, I might have to go back there and do something I would not regret, but that would certainly cause legal problems. You would do that for me. Go back and confront them. I would do a lot of things for you, Lydia. He met her eyes across the fire. More than I probably should. Her heart began to race. What do you mean? He looked away, staring out at the darkening lake. Nothing. Just that I feel protective of you, that is all. You have been through a lot. But Lydia thought it was more than that. She hoped it was more than that. Tobias, I need to tell you something. What? She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. These past few days with you have been the best days of my life, not just because you rescued me, although that is part of it, but because you make me feel like a person again, like I have value beyond my ability to work or serve. You see me, really see me, and I do not think anyone has done that since my mother died. Tobias was very still, his expression unreadable in the firelight. She continued, knowing she might be making a terrible mistake but unable to stop. I think what I am trying to say is that I care about you, not just as my rescuer but as a man, as Tobias. And I know it is too soon, and I know I do not have anything to offer you, but I needed to say it. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. Lydia felt her cheeks burning, regret already flooding through her. She had said too much, revealed too much. Then Tobias stood and walked around the fire. He knelt beside her, his large hands cupping her face gently. Lydia, from the moment I saw you in that cellar, dirty and scared but still fighting, still holding on to yourself, I felt something I have never felt before. I told myself it was just protectiveness, just a desire to help someone in need. But it is more than that. What is it? She whispered. I think I am falling in love with you. The words came out rough, almost painful. I know it is too fast. I know you have been through trauma and you might be confusing gratitude with something else, but I cannot help what I feel. You are the bravest, strongest, most beautiful person I have ever met, and being near you makes me want things I gave up on years ago. What things? A partner, a wife, a family, a life that is more than just surviving alone in the mountains. His thumbs stroked her cheeks gently. But I will not take advantage of you, Lydia. You need time to heal, to figure out who you are outside of that house. You need to find your freedom before you can choose to share it with someone else. Tears were streaming down Lydia's face now, but they were good tears, happy tears. What if I already know? What if I have already figured out that freedom means nothing without someone to share it with? Someone who sees me as an equal, who respects me, who makes me feel safe and valued and alive. Lydia, he said, and his voice was full of longing and restraint. Kiss me, she said. Please, just once. Let me know this is real. For a moment she thought he would refuse. Then he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, gentle at first, as if afraid she might break. But Lydia leaned into the kiss, her hands coming up to grip his broad shoulders, and the gentleness gave way to something deeper, more passionate. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tobias rested his forehead against hers. This does not change our plan. I am still taking you to Santa Fe, still getting you that legal freedom. If you still feel this way after that, after you have had time and space to think clearly, then we can talk about what comes next. I will still feel this way, Lydia said with certainty. Maybe. But I need to know you are choosing this, choosing me, because it is what you truly want. Not because I am the first person to show you kindness, not because you feel obligated. I do not feel obligated, I feel. She struggled for the right words. I feel like I have been asleep for 2 years and I am finally waking up. Like I have been locked in darkness and you brought me into the sunlight. not just physically, but in every way that matters. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips again. The sunlight was always inside you, Lydia. I just helped open the door. But that door leads both ways. You have brought light into my life too, light I did not know I was missing. They sat together by the fire for a long time, Lydia leaning against Tobias's broad chest, his arms wrapped around her. She felt safe in a way that went beyond physical safety, felt cherished and valued in a way she had only dreamed about during her darkest moments in the cellar. "Tell me about your cabin," she said. "Tell me what your life is like up there." So he did. He told her about the rhythm of his days, about hunting and trapping, about trading with the settlements, about the books he read during long winter nights. He told her about the garden he kept, the chickens that provided eggs, the simple pleasures of a life lived close to nature. "It sounds wonderful," Lydia said. "Simple but wonderful. It can be lonely," he admitted, "but it is honest. There is something to be said for that." "It would not have to be lonely," she said carefully, "if you had someone to share it with." His arms tightened around her. "Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that after Santa Fe, after we break my contract, I would like to come back to the mountains with you, if you would have me. I could learn to live that life, Tobias. I want to learn. And teaching. Your dream of becoming a teacher. Maybe there are other ways to teach. Maybe I could teach children in the settlements when we go to trade. Or maybe—" She turned to look at him. "Maybe some dreams change. Maybe what I really wanted was not to be a teacher specifically, but to have a purpose, to use my mind for something meaningful. There are many ways to do that. I will not let you give up your dreams for me. I am not giving them up. I am changing them. There is a difference." She reached up and touched his bearded face. "You told me I deserve to live, not just survive. Well, living with you in those mountains, building a life together, learning and growing together, that sounds like really living to me." He kissed her again, and this time there was less restraint, more promise. When they parted, he said, "We have 2 more days to Santa Fe. Let us take that time to be sure, to talk about what a life together would really mean. Then, if you are still certain, we will figure out how to make it work. I am already certain. I know you think you are, but humor me. We have time." They settled into their bedrolls that night, still on opposite sides of the fire, but somehow closer than before. Lydia fell asleep watching Tobias's profile in the firelight, her heart full of hope and possibility. The 3rd day of travel brought them down out of the highest peaks and into rolling foothills. The landscape changed from pine forests to scrub brush and red rock formations. Tobias pointed out various landmarks, explaining the geology and history of the region. "We are getting closer to Santa Fe," he said. "We will reach it by tomorrow evening if we keep a good pace. And then what happens? We meet with James. He will file the proper papers to nullify your contract. With the evidence of how they treated you, keeping you locked in that cellar, it should be straightforward. You might have to give testimony before a judge, but James will prepare you for that. Will I have to see them again? The Whitmores, possibly, but you will not be alone. I will be there, and so will James. They have no power over you anymore, Lydia. They just do not know it yet." They stopped for lunch near a distinctive rock formation that looked like a giant hand reaching toward the sky. As they ate, Tobias told Lydia more about what to expect in Santa Fe. "It is a real city, bigger than anything around Chisholm Ranch. There are shops and hotels, a church, schools. It can be overwhelming if you are not used to it." "I came from a city originally," Lydia reminded him. "Before my parents died, we lived in Kansas City. I remember the noise and crowds." "Then you will handle it fine. We will get you proper clothing, shoes, whatever you need. I have money saved from my trading. I cannot let you spend your money on me. You can and you will. Consider it an investment in our future if you like. A woman needs proper clothing, especially if she is going to appear before a judge. He paused. And especially if she is going to be my wife. Lydia's heart leaped. Your wife? Tobias looked almost embarrassed, color rising in his tan cheeks. I am saying this all wrong. I meant to wait to do this properly. But yes, my wife, if you will have me, I know I am not much of a catch. I live in the mountains, I have no formal education, I am rough around the edges. Yes, Lydia interrupted. Yes. Yes, I will marry you, I will be your wife. And you are wrong, you are exactly the right kind of catch, the best kind. She moved closer to him. You are kind and strong and good. You saved me, not just from that cellar, but from a life without hope. How could I not want to spend my life with you? He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I will spend every day trying to make you happy, trying to be worthy of you. You are already worthy, more than worthy. She pulled back to look at him. When? When can we marry? After the contract is broken, after you are legally free. Then we will find a preacher, do it proper. I want to do everything proper with you, Lydia. I want to honor you the way you deserve to be honored. They spent the afternoon riding and planning what their cabin would look like with 2 people living there, how they would expand the garden, where they might build an addition for children someday. Each detail felt precious, like they were weaving their future together with words and dreams. That night, they camped in a small canyon sheltered from the wind. As they sat by the fire after dinner, Tobias pulled something from his pack. I made this for you, he said, handing her a small object. It was a carving, a wooden figure of a bird in flight. The detail was exquisite, every feather carefully rendered, the wings spread wide as if caught in mid-soar. Tobias, this is beautiful. When did you make this? Last night after you fell asleep. I do a bit of carving when I cannot sleep, and I have been having trouble sleeping lately. He smiled slightly. Too much on my mind. Lydia turned the carving over in her hands, marveling at the craftsmanship. It is perfect. I will treasure it always. It is supposed to represent freedom, flight, the ability to go where you want, be who you want to be. He took her hand. That is what I want for you, Lydia. Complete freedom, even within our marriage. I never want you to feel trapped again. She leaned forward and kissed him, putting all her love and gratitude into that kiss. When they parted, she said, being with you is not a trap. It is the opposite. It is the first time I have felt free to be myself completely. They talked long into the night, as had become their custom. Tobias told her about his plans for expanding his trading, about possibly bringing in some cattle to raise along with the chickens. Lydia shared her ideas about teaching the children of the mountain families, about creating a small library in their cabin where people could borrow books. You have it all figured out, Tobias said, admiration clear in his voice. Not all of it, but enough to know it is what I want. This life with you, building something together, being partners in every sense of the word. As they settled into their bedrolls, Tobias said, one more day. Then everything changes. Everything already changed, Lydia replied. The moment you broke down that cellar door. The next morning dawned clear and bright, their last day of travel before reaching Santa Fe. Tobias was quieter than usual as they broke camp and started riding, and Lydia could sense tension in him. What is wrong? She asked. Just thinking about what happens when we reach the city. The legal process, facing down the Whitmores if they show up, all of it. I am not worried about the outcome. I know James will handle it well. I am just worried about you, about what it will cost you emotionally to go through it all. I will be fine. I am stronger than I look, remember? You said so yourself. I know you are. But knowing something and seeing you have to prove it are different things. He guided the horse around a large boulder. I just want to protect you from everything. You cannot protect me from everything, Tobias, and I would not want you to. Part of being free is facing things head-on, dealing with the difficult parts of life. I have to stand up for myself, prove that I am not broken by what the Whitmores did. Otherwise, it is just another form of hiding. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Several good teachers, actually. My mother, my experiences, and now you. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the landscape gradually becoming more settled. They passed ranches and farms, saw more people on the roads, signs of civilization returning. As afternoon approached, they crested a hill and Lydia got her first glimpse of Santa Fe in the distance. The city sprawled across the landscape, adobe buildings glowing golden in the sunlight. It was bigger than she had imagined, more bustling and alive. "There it is," Tobias said. "We will reach it in about an hour. I know a respectable boarding house where we can get you a room. I will stay somewhere else, keep everything proper until we are married." "I do not want to be apart from you," Lydia said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I do not want to be apart from you either, but I will not have anyone question your reputation or virtue. We do this right, Lydia. We have come this far, we can wait a bit longer." She knew he was right, but it did not make the idea of sleeping without him nearby any easier. She had grown accustomed to falling asleep with the sound of his breathing, with the knowledge that he was close. As they entered Santa Fe, Lydia was struck by the mix of cultures. Spanish and American influences blended in the architecture and the people. The streets were busy with wagons and horses, with people conducting business and living their lives. It was both exciting and overwhelming after days in the quiet mountains. Tobias guided them to a neat adobe building on a quieter street. A sign identified it as Mrs. Garcia's boarding house for respectable ladies. He helped Lydia dismount and escorted her inside. Mrs. Garcia was a plump, kind-faced woman who looked Lydia over with shrewd but not unkind eyes. "You need a room, yes?" "Yes, please," Tobias said. "For the lady. Several nights, possibly a week." "I have a nice room, clean, with good meals included. $3 for the week." "That is fine." Tobias paid without hesitation. "This is Miss Lydia Turner. She is under my protection, and I want to make sure she is safe and comfortable." Mrs. Garcia's eyes sharpened with understanding. She had clearly seen situations like this before. "Your sister?" she asked diplomatically. "My fiancé," Tobias said firmly. "We are here to handle some legal matters and then we will be married." "Ah, congratulations. Then you need not worry, sir. I run a proper establishment. The young lady will be very safe here." Lydia was shown to a small but clean room with a real bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking a courtyard garden. It was luxury compared to the servants' quarters at the Whitmore house, though it felt empty without Tobias's presence. He waited in the hallway while she settled her few belongings, then walked her back downstairs. "I am going to see James now, explain the situation. I will come back this evening to take you to dinner and tell you what he says. Will you be all right here until then?" "I will be fine." "Go. Do what needs to be done." He hesitated, then pulled her close for a quick embrace. "Everything is going to work out, Lydia. I promise you that." After he left, Lydia asked Mrs. Garcia for some hot water and spent time washing thoroughly, scrubbing away the dust of travel. She changed into the best dress Martha had packed, feeling strange in proper clothing after days in travel-worn garments. When Tobias returned that evening, she barely recognized him at first. He had trimmed his beard, tied his hair back more neatly, and wore clean clothes. He was still unmistakably himself, still radiating that powerful presence, but he looked more civilized somehow. "You look different," she said. "So do you." "Beautiful." He offered his arm. "James wants to meet you tonight. I told him everything, and he is confident he can help. But he needs to hear your story directly, understand exactly what happened." They walked to a restaurant, a nice establishment with white tablecloths and candles. James Morrison was waiting for them, a tall, thin man with intelligent eyes and a ready smile. "Miss Turner, it is a pleasure to meet you. Tobias has told me about your situation, and I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to help you." Over dinner, Lydia told her story. She detailed the contract her uncle had signed, the conditions at the Whitmore house, the increasing cruelty, and finally the days locked in the cellar. James took notes, asking occasional questions, his expression growing grimmer as she spoke. "This is even worse than Tobias indicated," he said when she finished. "The conditions you describe amount to slavery, which is illegal. The fact that they imprisoned you without cause, denied you food and water, that constitutes criminal conduct. We have more than enough to nullify your contract. In fact, I think we can go further. We can file charges against the Whitmores." "I do not want revenge," Lydia said quickly. "I just want to be free of them, I understand. But they should not be allowed to do this to others. They have other servants, do they not?" Lydia nodded. "Several. Most are treated better than I was, but everyone lives in fear of Mrs. Whitmore's moods. Then we owe it to those people to stop this." James leaned forward. "Here is what I propose. We file paperwork first thing tomorrow morning to nullify your contract. I will also file a complaint with the territorial marshal, outlining the abuse and imprisonment. The Whitmores will be notified that they must appear in court. This gives them a chance to defend themselves, though I doubt they will have much of a defense." "How long will all this take?" Tobias asked. "The contract nullification should be quick, a few days at most. The criminal case will take longer, possibly weeks. But Miss Turner will not have to stay in Santa Fe for all of it. I can represent her interests. She will need to give testimony at some point, but we can arrange that at her convenience." Lydia felt a weight lifting from her chest. "So I could really be free, just like that, just like that. The law is clear on this, Miss Turner. What was done to you was wrong, and we will make it right." After dinner, Tobias walked her back to the boarding house. They stopped in the courtyard garden, neither wanting to say good night yet. "How do you feel?" he asked, taking her hands in his. Hopeful, scared, relieved, everything all at once. She looked up at him. "Thank you, Tobias. For all of this. For caring enough to help me, for bringing me here, for giving me a chance at a real future. You do not have to thank me. This is what people who love each other do. They help each other, support each other, fight for each other." He pulled her close. "And I do love you, Lydia. More than I thought it was possible to love someone so quickly. I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you when you appeared in that cellar like some kind of avenging angel. But I knew for certain when you took the time to teach me things, to talk to me like my thoughts and opinions mattered. You gave me back my sense of self, Tobias. That is a gift beyond measure." They stood together in the quiet garden, holding each other as the stars came out overhead. Eventually, Tobias forced himself to step back. "I should go. Let you get some rest. Tomorrow starts the legal process, and you will need your strength." "Will I see you in the morning?" "You will see me every morning from now on," he promised. "I will be here for breakfast, and we will go to James's office together. You are not facing any of this alone." That night, lying in the comfortable bed at Mrs. Garcia's boarding house, Lydia stared at the ceiling and marveled at how much her life had changed in less than a week. She had gone from a servant locked in a cellar to a woman on the verge of legal freedom and marriage to a man she loved. It seemed impossible, like something from a storybook rather than real life. But it was real. The tenderness in Tobias's eyes was real. The legal papers James would file tomorrow were real. The future stretching out before her, full of possibility and hope, was real. She thought about the cellar, about those dark days when she had almost given up hope. She thought about the sound of the door breaking, of seeing Tobias silhouetted in the doorway like salvation itself. He had brought her into the sunlight, literally and figuratively, and nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, Tobias arrived promptly at 8. He had brought fresh bread and fruit for breakfast, and they ate in the boarding house dining room while Mrs. Garcia fussed over them approvingly. "You have found a good man," she told Lydia. "I can always tell, and he looks at you like you are the most precious thing in the world." That is how it should be. At James's office, the lawyer had already prepared the initial documents. He went over them carefully with Lydia, explaining each section. "This petition to nullify your contract is based on several grounds," he said. "First, you were a minor when it was signed, and the guardian who signed it was acting against your best interests. Second, the conditions of your servitude violated the terms of the contract and basic standards of humane treatment. Third, your unlawful imprisonment constitutes a breach so severe that the contract is automatically voided." "It sounds very official," Lydia said. "It needs to be. We are fighting powerful people who are used to getting their way, but the law is on our side." James looked at her seriously. "You should know that the Whitmores will likely try to fight this. They may send representatives here or even come themselves. They may try to intimidate you or convince you to return. You need to be prepared for that." "I am not going back," Lydia said firmly, "no matter what they say or do." "Good. That resolve will serve you well." James gathered the papers. "I am going to file these this morning. The court will schedule a hearing, probably within a few days. In the meantime, you should stay close to the boarding house. Do not go anywhere alone. Tobias, I assume you will be staying nearby." "I will be with her every moment I can be without compromising her reputation," Tobias said. "She is under my protection." As they left James's office, Lydia felt both exhilarated and nervous. The wheels were in motion. There was no going back now. Tobias seemed to sense her mood. "Let us do something to take your mind off all this. Let me show you Santa Fe properly. There are some beautiful places here, things worth seeing." They spent the day exploring the city. Tobias took her to the old plaza, where merchants sold goods from all over the territory. He bought her a beautiful shawl woven in traditional patterns and a pair of proper boots. They visited the cathedral, its adobe walls and wooden beams creating a sense of timeless peace. They ate lunch at a small cafe and watched the people of Santa Fe go about their lives. "I could live here," Lydia said thoughtfully as they walked. "It is different from what I imagined my life would be, but I could make a place for myself here." "But," Tobias prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice, "but I keep thinking about your cabin in the mountains, about the peace and quiet, about the way the stars look from up there, about building a life that is ours, separate from all this." She gestured at the busy streets. "Is that foolish? To turn away from opportunity and civilization for a simple life in the wilderness? It is not foolish if it is what you truly want. But Lydia, you need to understand what that life really means. It means hard work every day. It means long winters with snow so deep you cannot leave the cabin for weeks. It means being far from doctors if you get sick, far from stores if you need supplies. It means isolation, even if you have me. It also means freedom. Real freedom, not just legal freedom. It means living on our own terms, being who we really are without having to pretend or perform for others." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "I know you worry that I am romanticizing it, that I do not understand what I would be giving up. But I do understand, Tobias, and I still want it. I want that life with you." He cupped her face in his hands, his expression intense. "Then that is what we will have. After we finish here, after we are married, we will go back to the mountains. We will build our life there together. And if you ever change your mind, if you ever want something different, you tell me. Promise me that. I promise. But I will not change my mind." 3 days later, Lydia found herself in a courtroom standing before a judge. James had prepared her thoroughly, explaining what to expect, what questions might be asked. But nothing could fully prepare her for seeing Adelaide Whitmore sitting in the back of the courtroom, her face twisted with fury. The Whitmores had sent their own lawyer, a slick man from Chisholm Ranch, who argued that Lydia was ungrateful and difficult, that the time in the cellar was necessary discipline for theft she had committed. "That is a lie," Lydia said clearly when given the chance to speak. "I never stole anything. Mrs. Whitmore put me in that cellar because her son looked at me during dinner and she blamed me for it. She left me there for days with almost no food or water. That is not discipline. That is cruelty." James presented Martha's written testimony, smuggled out through Tobias's trading contacts. The cook confirmed everything Lydia said, detailing the abuse she had witnessed over 2 years. Other servants had added their own statements, creating a picture of systematic mistreatment. The judge, an older man with stern features, read through all the documents carefully. Finally, he looked up. "I have heard enough. The contract between Miss Turner and the Whitmore family is hereby nullified, effective immediately. Miss Turner, you are under no obligation to return to their service. In fact, I am ordering that you not return, as the conditions described constitute a danger to your health and safety." Lydia felt Tobias's hand tighten on hers. They had won, but the judge was not finished. "Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the Territorial Marshal for criminal investigation. The imprisonment of Miss Turner appears to violate territorial law, and there may be charges filed. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, you should retain counsel." Adelaide Whitmore stood up, her face red. "This is an outrage. That girl is a liar and a thief, and you are taking her word over ours." "I am taking the word of multiple witnesses over yours, madam, and I suggest you watch your tongue in my courtroom." The judge banged his gavel. "This matter is concluded. Miss Turner, you are free to go." Outside the courthouse, Lydia felt like she could finally breathe again. The contract that had bound her for 2 years was broken. She was truly free. "How do you feel?" Tobias asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Free, terrified, happy, everything." She looked up at him. "What happens now?" "Now we get married. Then we go home." They were married 3 days later in a small ceremony at the cathedral. James served as a witness, along with Mrs. Garcia, who cried happy tears throughout. Lydia wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Garcia had helped her buy, and Tobias wore his best clothes, cleaned and pressed. The priest spoke the words in both Spanish and English, binding them together as husband and wife. When Tobias kissed her, Lydia felt like her heart would burst from happiness. This man, this strong, kind, wonderful man, was hers, and she was his. They spent their wedding night at a small hotel, finally able to be together without worrying about propriety. Tobias was gentle and patient, making sure Lydia felt cherished and safe. She had been nervous, but in his arms everything felt right. "I love you," he whispered in the darkness. "I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you know that. I already know it. I feel it in everything you do, everything you are." She traced the muscles of his chest, marveling that this man was her husband. "I love you too, Tobias, more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." They stayed in Santa Fe for another week, making sure all the legal matters were fully resolved. The territorial marshal interviewed Lydia, and she learned that charges were being filed against the Whitmores. Other servants had come forward with their own stories, emboldened by Lydia's courage. "You have started something," James told her. "Real change. The Whitmores and people like them will not be able to treat servants as slaves anymore. The law is watching now." On their last day in Santa Fe, Lydia and Tobias said goodbye to James and Mrs. Garcia. Both had become friends, people who had helped change the course of Lydia's life. "You will visit?" Mrs. Garcia asked, hugging Lydia tightly. "We will, and you are always welcome in our home up in the mountains." "I am not much for mountains," Mrs. Garcia said with a laugh. "But I am happy for you, child. You have found something rare. Hold on to it." The journey back to the mountains took longer than the journey to Santa Fe because they were not running from anything now. They stopped often, enjoying the landscape, talking about their future. Tobias taught Lydia more about wilderness survival, about reading the weather and tracking animals. She proved to be a quick learner, her intelligence and determination serving her well. "You are going to be a true mountain woman," Tobias said admiringly as she successfully started a fire on her first try. "I am going to be your wife," she corrected. "Everything else is just details." When they finally reached the cabin, Lydia felt like she was coming home. The place that had sheltered her for a single night before Santa Fe now felt familiar and welcoming. Tobias carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition. "Welcome home, Mrs. Edwards," he said, setting her down gently. "Mrs. Edwards. I like the sound of that." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Tobias had worried that Lydia would find the isolation difficult, but she thrived in it. She helped him with his work, learned to hunt and trap, and started a larger garden. She created a small library corner in the cabin, and when they went down to trade, she began teaching children in the settlements, just as she had dreamed. The first winter was challenging, with snow that piled higher than Lydia had ever seen. But inside the cabin, they were warm and content. They read books by firelight, played cards, told each other stories, and made love under piles of furs while the wind howled outside. "Are you happy?" Tobias asked her one night as they lay together. "Happier than I ever thought possible. Are you?" "I did not know I could feel this way. You have changed everything, Lydia, given me a reason to build something beyond just survival." Spring came, and with it news. James sent a letter via a trader. The Whitmores had been found guilty of multiple charges and fined heavily. They had been forced to release all their servants and were being watched by the territorial authorities. Adelaide Whitmore, in particular, had been censured by Santa Fe society for her cruelty. "Justice," Lydia said, reading the letter. "I did not think we would really get it. You got more than justice. You got your freedom, your life, your future." Tobias put his arms around her from behind. "And I got you." She turned in his arms. "I have been thinking about something." "What?" "I think I might be with child." The look on Tobias's face was everything she could have hoped for. Joy, wonder, excitement, and a touch of fear. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. I have missed my monthly courses twice now, and I have been feeling different. We should probably ride down to see the doctor in the nearest settlement to confirm it. A baby." He said it like he was testing the word, seeing how it felt. "Our baby. Are you happy about it?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He picked her up and spun her around, making her laugh. "We are going to be parents, Lydia. We are going to have a family." They made the journey to the settlement the next week, and the doctor confirmed what Lydia already knew. She was pregnant, probably about 3 months along. The baby would come in late fall, right before the winter snows. "We need to prepare," Tobias said, already planning. "Make sure we have everything you need, everything the baby will need. I am going to add that room to the cabin, make more space. And we should have the doctor come stay with us for the birth. I am not taking any chances with you or the baby." Tobias slowed down. She laughed at his intensity. "We have months, and women have been having babies in the wilderness for thousands of years. We will be fine." But she loved his protectiveness, loved how seriously he took his role as husband and soon-to-be father. Over the summer, he worked tirelessly on the cabin expansion, adding a new room that would serve as a nursery. Lydia helped when she could, though Tobias insisted she not overwork herself. She spent time preparing baby clothes, learning from the women in the settlements about what to expect. They welcomed her warmly, these mountain wives, recognizing in her one of their own. She was no longer the servant girl from the Whitmore house. She was Lydia Edwards, wife of Tobias, part of the mountain community. As fall approached and her belly swelled with their child, Lydia often thought about that dark cellar, about the girl she had been then. That girl would not have believed this future was possible. But Tobias had broken down more than just a door that night. He had broken through her despair, her resignation, her belief that she was worth nothing. "What are you thinking about?" Tobias asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Just about how far we have come, from that cellar to this." She gestured at their home, at the mountains surrounding them, at the life they had built. "It feels like a miracle." "You are the miracle," he said, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "You and this little one. You are everything I never knew I needed." In late October, as the first snows threatened, Lydia went into labor. True to his word, Tobias had arranged for the doctor to be staying with them. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Tobias felt his heart would stop from fear. But Lydia was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for. Their son was born just after dawn, his cries echoing through the cabin. Tobias held his wife and child, tears streaming down his face, overcome with emotion. "He is perfect," Lydia said, exhausted but glowing with happiness. "Absolutely perfect, like his mother," Tobias kissed her forehead. "You are amazing. You are the strongest person I have ever known." They named him Thomas after Tobias's father, but with the hope that their son would make better choices, live a better life. Thomas Edwards came into the world surrounded by love and hope, and he would never know what it meant to be unlocked from a cellar, because his parents had already unlocked themselves from every prison that mattered. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Lydia and Tobias marveled at every milestone, every smile, every new sound their son made. The cabin rang with baby laughter and content sounds, and even the difficult moments felt precious. When Thomas was about 6 months old, James made the long journey to visit them. He brought news from Santa Fe. "The Whitmore estate has been sold," he told them over dinner. "Adelaide and her husband are moving east, apparently unable to face the social consequences of their crimes. The servants have all been freed and compensated. Your courage in coming forward, Lydia, it changed things for a lot of people." Lydia looked at her son sleeping in a cradle near the fire. "I just wanted to be free. I did not set out to change anything." "Sometimes that is how change happens," James said. "One person stands up and it gives others the courage to stand up too. You should be proud." "I am proud of her," Tobias said, his hand finding Lydia's. "Every single day." Years passed and their family grew. A daughter, Catherine, joined Thomas when he was 3. Then another son, Daniel, 2 years later. The cabin expanded to accommodate them all, and Lydia's dream of teaching became reality in a different way than she had imagined. She taught her children at home, and in the summers, children from the settlements would come to stay for a few weeks, learning from Lydia in a sort of informal mountain school. Tobias continued his trading, but now he had help. Thomas grew tall and strong like his father, learning the mountains and wilderness skills from a young age. Catherine was fierce and independent, always ready for adventure. Daniel was quieter, preferring books to hunting, and Lydia recognized something of herself in him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Tobias took Lydia back to the meadow where they had stopped on their journey to Santa Fe. the place where they had first begun to acknowledge their feelings for each other. "I wanted to bring you back here," he said as they stood among the wildflowers, older now but no less in love, "to remind you of where we started. I do not need reminding. I think about it often, about how different my life might have been if you had not broken down that door. I think about it too, about how empty my life was before you. I thought I was content, living alone in my mountain cabin, but I was just existing, not really living. You taught me the difference." She leaned against his broad chest, his arms coming around her naturally. "We taught each other. You showed me that I was worth more than I believed. I showed you that opening your heart does not make you weak. You showed me that strength comes in many forms," he corrected, "and that the strongest thing I ever did was let myself love you." They renewed their vows there in the meadow, just the two of them and the mountains as witnesses. It was a private ceremony, but it felt more meaningful than their church wedding had been. This was just them, their love, their commitment to continue building the life they had created together. When they returned to the cabin, their children were waiting with a surprise. Thomas had carved a sign for the cabin that read Edwards Family ESD, 1878. It hung above the door, marking this place as theirs, as home. "You ever miss it?" Catherine asked her mother one day when she was about 12. "The cities, the people, the easier life." Lydia looked around at their cabin, at the mountains beyond, at her family gathered for dinner. "No," she said honestly. "This is the life I chose, and I choose it again every single day. Your father brought me out of darkness into light, and I have been grateful for that gift every moment since." "Tell us the story again," Daniel pleaded, as he often did, "about how Papa broke the door and saved you." So Lydia told them, as she had many times before. But she always made sure they understood that the breaking of the door was just the beginning. The real saving came in everything that followed, in the building of trust and love, in the creation of a partnership that honored them both. "It sounds like a fairy tale," Catherine said. "It does," Lydia agreed. "But it is better than a fairy tale because it is real. Real love, real work, real life. And that is worth more than any fantasy." As the children grew older and eventually left to make their own lives, some staying in the mountains and some seeking opportunity elsewhere, Lydia and Tobias found themselves alone again in the cabin. But it was a different kind of alone than Tobias had experienced before Lydia. This was chosen solitude, comfortable silence between two people who knew each other completely. They grew old together in those mountains, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the effects of a life lived hard but well. Tobias's strength remained, though he moved a bit slower. Lydia's sharp mind never dimmed, and she continued teaching whenever young families came to the mountains. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the peaks, holding hands the way they had for decades. Sometimes they would talk, sharing memories or making plans. Sometimes they would just sit in contented silence. "You remember the first thing you said to me?" Lydia asked one such evening. They were both in their 60s now, with grandchildren visiting regularly. "Are you the girl they keep down here?" Tobias quoted. "Not my finest moment, honestly. I was so angry when I saw you in that cellar, I could barely speak properly. I remember thinking you were the biggest man I had ever seen. Terrifying and wonderful at the same time, like you had stepped out of a legend. And I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met. Starving and imprisoned, but not broken, never broken." She squeezed his hand. "Because somewhere deep down I was waiting for you, waiting for someone to break down that door and show me there was another way to live." "We found each other," Tobias said. "In that dark place we found each other. And we built all this." He gestured at their home, at the mountains, at the life visible in every detail around them. "We did. We really did." They sat together as the stars came out, the same stars that had watched over them that first night when Tobias had rescued Lydia from the cellar, the same stars that had witnessed their journey to Santa Fe, their wedding, the birth of their children. The mountains had seen it all, silent witnesses to a love story that had started in darkness and grown into enduring light. Lydia often thought about that girl in the cellar, locked in darkness, losing hope. She wished she could reach back through time and tell her, "Hold on. Help is coming. Love is coming. A life beyond your wildest dreams is coming. All you have to do is survive long enough to hear the sound of a door breaking, to see the silhouette of a mountain man against the light." She would tell that girl, "He is going to bring you into the sunlight and you are going to bloom in ways you never imagined possible. You are going to be happy. You are going to be loved. You are going to be free." But she did not need to reach back because that girl had already lived through it, had already experienced the miracle of being saved and saving in return, had already built a life worth living. As Tobias helped his wife stand and they walked back into their cabin together, moving slowly but steadily, Lydia reflected on the strange turns life could take. How the worst moment of your life could become the doorway to the best. How darkness could give way to light, captivity to freedom, despair to love. She thought about all the people whose lives had changed because of her story. The other servants freed from the Whitmore estate. The children she had taught over the years. Her own children and grandchildren who grew up knowing that love meant respect, that marriage meant partnership, that family meant choosing each other every day. The legacy of that broken door extended far beyond one rescued girl. It had rippled outward, changing lives, creating new possibilities, proving that courage and kindness could triumph over cruelty and power. Inside the cabin, Tobias built up the fire while Lydia prepared their evening tea. They moved around each other with the ease of long practice, comfortable in their shared space, their shared life. When they settled into their chairs with their tea, Tobias reached over and took Lydia's hand as he did every evening. "I love you," he said, simple and true. "I love you too," she replied. "Thank you for breaking down that door. Thank you for being worth saving." "We saved each other," Lydia corrected gently. "That is how it really works." Outside, the mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the stories of all the people who had loved and lived in these hills. But none of those stories, Lydia thought, could be sweeter than hers. The servant locked in the cellar and the mountain man who brought her into the sunlight, who loved her, who built a life with her that honored them both. It was, in the end, exactly the story she had always deserved. And as she sat there with her husband's hand in hers, the fire warm and welcoming, the mountain standing eternal guard outside, she knew that this was what freedom truly meant. Not just the absence of chains, but the presence of love. Not just escape from darkness, but the choice to walk toward light. She had made that choice every day for decades now, and she would continue making it for however many days remained. Because that was what Tobias had really given her when he broke down that cellar door, not just rescue but the power to choose. To choose hope over despair, love over fear, life over mere survival, and she chose it. Every single day she chose it. The mountains witnessed it all, patient and eternal, sheltering this family that had grown from such unlikely beginnings. The cabin stood strong against the elements, a testament to what could be built when two people worked together toward a common dream. The stars shone overhead, constant companions on a journey that had started in darkness and led to this perfect, peaceful ending. Lydia Turner Edwards had been a servant locked in a cellar. Tobias Edwards had been a mountain man living alone. But together, they became so much more. They became partners, lovers, parents, teachers, and friends. They became a family. They became a home, and in the end that was the greatest triumph of all. Not just that Lydia had escaped the cellar, but that she had found something worth escaping to. Not just that Tobias had broken down a door, but that he had opened his heart to what lay beyond it. They lived out their days in those mountains, surrounded by love and beauty. Their story passed down through generations as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can survive. That even when all seems lost, salvation might be just a broken door away. That love, real and true and deep, can heal wounds that seemed beyond healing. And when their time finally came, when age and nature ran their course, they went together, hands clasped, surrounded by children and grandchildren who carried forward the legacy of that day when a mountain man broke down a cellar door and brought a servant girl into the sunlight, changing both their lives forever. Their story became legend in the mountains, told and retold around campfires and dinner tables. The tale of Lydia and Tobias, whose love had started in darkness and grown strong in the light, who had proven that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in standing alone, but in choosing to stand together. The cabin remained for years after, visited by descendants and travelers, a monument to what had been built there. The sign Thomas had carved still hung above the door, weathered but legible. Edwards Family ESD, 1878. And on quiet nights, when the wind blew just right through the mountain pines, some said you could still feel their presence there. The love that had filled that cabin for so many years, the laughter and tears and quiet moments of connection. It lingered in the walls, in the air, in the very soil of the mountain, because some loves are like that. They do not end when the lovers do. They continue, woven into the fabric of the world, inspiring others, showing what is possible when two people find each other against all odds and choose every day to build something beautiful together. Lydia had been locked in a cellar, forgotten and abused, but she had not stayed there. She had been brought into the sunlight by a man who saw her worth when no one else did. And together, they had created a light of their own, bright enough to illuminate not just their own lives but the lives of everyone they touched. That was their true legacy. Not just survival, not just escape, but transformation. The turning of darkness into light, of despair into hope, of loneliness into love. It was, in every way that mattered, a perfect ending, and a perfect beginning. Because their story lived on in their descendants, in the changed laws that protected servants, in the children Lydia had taught who went on to teach others, in the values of respect and partnership and chosen love that they had modeled so well. The mountains remembered them. The stars remembered them. And in the hearts of all who heard their story they lived on, proof that love can break down any door, that courage can overcome any darkness, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the person who saves you is also the person you have been waiting for all your life. In the end, that broken cellar door had not just freed one young woman. It had opened a pathway to a future neither Lydia nor Tobias had imagined, but both had desperately needed. It had brought two lonely souls together and given them the chance to build something lasting and true. And that, more than any fairy tale or legend, was the real magic. The everyday miracle of two people choosing each other, honoring each other, loving each other through all the seasons of life. From that first moment in the darkness to their final moments in the light, they had been a team, a partnership, a love story for the ages. The servant locked in the cellar had become a teacher, a mother, a beloved wife, a pillar of her community. The mountain man living in isolation had become a husband, a father, a protector not just of his family but of justice itself. Together, they had been more than either could have been alone, and that was the true ending of their story. Not an ending at all, really, but a legacy that would continue as long as people believed in the power of love to transform, to heal, to save. As long as someone remembered that once, in the mountains of New Mexico in 1878, a man broke down a door and brought a woman into the sunlight, and from that single act of courage and compassion, a lifetime of love had grown. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their love proven beyond any doubt. And in the quiet cabin among the eternal mountains, their spirits rested, content in the knowledge that they had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. That was all anyone could ask. That was everything that mattered. And as the sun set over the mountains one more time, casting its golden light across the peaks and valleys, it illuminated a legacy of love that would never truly fade. Because real love, the kind Lydia and Tobias had shared, never really ends. It just transforms, passing from generation to generation, inspiring new stories, new loves, new moments of courage when someone breaks down a door and brings another soul into the light.